Oos! Oos! Ladies and gentlemen, our Oos is here with us for the first time. And you're saying to myself, well, why is he chanting Oos after the end of Survivor Series? Well, I promise you, our guest tonight, he's going to be just as big as Roman. He's not going to fool us like maybe Sammy did to Kevin Owens, because he's got a journey that I'm excited to get on, and we're going to find out much more about that journey and all the championships, the matches, and the memories, and even a thought or two on what JDT had to say a couple of weeks ago about him on Sportswire Radio. So let's cut to the chase, because it's Saturday night and Sunday morning, depending on where you are. So without further ado, here on the Sports Report, number one global sports show, pro wrestling star here, the X-Man, James Xaden. Oos! Oos!
Oos.
Oos! I've been wanting to do that for a long time, and you were the right wrestler at the right time, because I've been doing it on social media. People are sharing it left and right, whether it's on my Twitter, my Instagram, or on Facebook. So thank you to everyone who's done that. But you are certainly our Oos. You were definitely our ace. And the X-Man, I mean, how are you? And nice to meet you finally. And let's say hello and obviously get right into it. But thank you for being with us, my friend.
Congratulations on the 500, by the way.
I appreciate that very much. I'm very grateful for that. Yes, I saw that on Sportswire Radio, as I'm sure you had pointed out, that we had passed the 500 follower milestone. Certainly many people around the world, many wrestlers around the world have followed us, and you happen to be one of them. So thank you for going along our journey here on Sportswire Radio the past 4 years.
No problem.
But obviously, good to be with you. I can talk about Sportswire Radio, but we're not here about that. I want to know about James Xaden, because I'm sure you're aware of now, about 2 or so weeks ago, in your chair right now, we had on a guy, JDT, who's obviously right now one of the 2 champions in a company called Wrestling Championship Entertainment. And he is obviously now won his first championship, and that is the Interstate Openweight Championship, as he had defeated a guy, Catalyst, James Marshall. But that's not the point, because I had brought your name up, and certainly Mr. JDT had kind of, I guess, an unexpected or out-of-body-like experience when I brought your name up. So the X-Man, I'm sure that you're well aware about some of those comments. And for those that are listening and watching on Sportswire Radio, maybe even JDT, maybe even those that are fans of Wrestling Championship Entertainment, I'd like to know what you thought about those comments.
Well, I will say this. The last match me and him had, there had been a little bit of a mishap during the match. So I ended up taking a leave, and personally at the time I thought it was possibly my last match, but he took it upon himself to take the blame that he had ended it, and he didn't want to do that. So for a long time he took that and kept blaming himself, and he just felt really bad for that. So my take on why he reacted the way he did was, now that weight of the blame is completely gone. And we have a lot of respect for each other, a good amount of respect. When we started out, we were basically blood brothers. Like, we treated each other like brothers. And we just had so many matches we did. We had so many moments throughout all the wrestling we've done, whether it was outside, in a yard, in any of the companies of the matches, even if we weren't facing each other. There was always us in the back talking and going over things. And there were difficult times, but
sure,
that's wrestling. So it's for me, it is a sigh of relief now that he doesn't have to take that blame. So for people thinking now that I'm going to be his weakness or that he's afraid, or it's, put it this way, I think people need to be on high alert now because he's going to have more focus and he's going to have more confidence to be able to make more damage. So it ain't a weakness. It's it's a there's a lot more behind that than a lot of people realize. I know him very well, and this
Sure.
isn't going to slow him down.
All right, but I got a couple thoughts on this because his reaction toward it doesn't seem like what you're explaining to us.
Nope.
So how can you say then that he is going to have this confidence and use this as a springboard to go into next season in Wrestling Championship Entertainment? Because what you're saying still to me, because I had him on the air, I'm the guy that brought him up, and it didn't seem like to me at all, the X-Man, that has that reaction, that feeling that you're telling us that he's going to have.
There's more there than meets the eye, and people
Okay.
realize. And he's done this before in the past, so I know that this isn't going to slow him down because the off season is a little while yet. So
Right. Several months. I mean, I know it
yep,
doesn't seem like it, but we do have several months until Wrestling Championship Entertainment resumes. So, I mean, that still is a long time in some ways. They always say in sports, when you're sitting on the sidelines for that long, you have a lot to think about. That's why I'm
yep.
still going back to my point now. I'm still skeptical, though.
Well, I have to say this.
Okay.
He may seem like right now he's softer, he's at a weak point, but when there has been not much contact between me and him because he always thought I was angry, mad at him, and I was always like the big brother to him.
Mm.
And so it's almost like you had this fight with a family member that you were close to at one point and you were like friends, family, and then finding out that they're able to make a return, a full recovery that you took the blame for years and you hated yourself for it. So I think it's going to be quite interesting for the competition now because I still am calling it to be more of him gonna make a full comeback, and it isn't going to slow him down one bit.
Well, they call him the chairman, and they certainly call him the chairman for good reasons. And I think about Wrestling Championship Entertainment, and especially those past few shows that they had. I mean, certainly he showed why he was the chairman, and he's definitely a man that I would not want to mess with. Definitely a man that Craven Rage certainly, I think, had his hands full with. But I want to ask you this question in a different context then, because obviously you made some points, and there's certainly valid points, and I'm obviously going to take your judgment because obviously you were the guy in the ring with him. But let me ask you this question. If you were in the spot of JDT and the roles were reversed with what happened in that match and kind of the different things that had went down and maybe led to where you have not been in the ring for as long as you have,
Yeah.
would you have reacted differently? Let's say if I was the one asking you that question and it was JDT on the other end. What's your thoughts on that?
Well, it's one of those things where you get this overwhelming emotion because it's almost like it completely blindsides you because
Sure.
you don't think of that happening. And for me, I would, if I were caught off guard like that, I would have been excited. I would have possibly gotten emotional, but at the same time, the way I know him, he is not going to stop thinking about being able to maybe have a rematch down the road to kind of have it full circle, but not have the outcome it did. And it's been years, so it's going to be on totally different levels right now if we were to get in the ring.
All right. Well, let me ask you then a question because obviously you've said a lot here in such a short amount of time. And you think about things that happen or mishaps in the ring. I mean, there's obviously historical ones. Owen Hart and Stone Cold Steve Austin comes to mind. Draws and D'Lo Brown. I mean,
Yep.
there's a number of incidents. I mean, the Tombstone Pile Driver. I mean, comes to mind with the Undertaker. In fact, he couldn't do it for a number of years. I mean, there's a number of mishaps that you see out there in the ring. There was an incident with Chris Jericho, I believe, and Bubba Ray Dudley. And that was Bully Ray Dudley at one point. I mean, you can go down. There's a long list of ECW. There's probably about 50 of them. I'd be here all night
Christopher
with you and
Daniels
listen.
was another one too.
You got the mass transit incident. I mean, there's a number of them, right? I mean, I could go on all day about them. Goldberg and Bret Hart, obviously. How could I not forget about that? But when it comes to all those different things that went on, I have to ask you this question on a personal level, James Xaden, the X-Men. How much have you thought about all those years, that last match, and how much have you thought about that into where you said, you know what? Again, we're talking about an off season, 5-6 months. You've had 10 times that time to think about this. And, how much did you think about this and how did it make you feel? Because you're the guy that hasn't been in the ring.
Every day.
That's why I asked.
Been thinking about it every day. And could it have gone worse? Yes, absolutely. Could it have gone better? Again, absolutely. It's just one of those things that you don't account for and you don't think will happen, and that's when it gets you. But I've been nonstop thinking about it.
Okay, well, that's a fair point, certainly. And I also want to give a shout out to Sean Jovi. Of course, Sean Jovi was with us last week on Sportswire Radio, and he was with us with Darkfire. And of course, Sean Jovi is a big YouTube star. He has got several hundred subscribers in his own range. So please make sure that you support Sean Jovi, because I think he's over the 500 subscriber mark in his own right. So please support him. He's got the new Pokemon game he's playing for people and streaming. So make sure you support. Check him out. Definitely check him out. I'll get to him, I'm sure, on another time. But let me ask you then this follow-up question on JDT, because, again, you've said a lot, because you talked about the fact I caught a couple of minutes ago that you hope to get in there in the ring with him at some point.
Yes.
I have to ask you now, as I'm sure you're aware of, he is a wrestler in Wrestling Championship Entertainment, the X-Man James Xaden. Are you implying to those that are listening and watching this on Sportswire Radio, you would like to maybe face the chairman, JDT, maybe in Wrestling Championship Entertainment next season? And ladies and gentlemen, it looks like we may have some technical difficulties there with the X-Men, James Xaden. I don't know if somebody's pulling his leg under him. I don't know if it's technical difficulties where maybe JDT's getting nervous, but obviously we hope that we can get him back on. That is James Xaden, the X-Man. Also want to make sure we continue to plug Sean Jovi and his vlogs. Obviously, we've certainly seen a number of them. I think my favorite was the one with the corn maze still. I think we said that last week on the air. So we hope to get back here, the X-Man James Xaden. My name is the Reverend Tom Brice, and it looks like we have James Xaden about to come on here. So we'll hopefully see him here. And also we have on the new Messiah, Nicholas Crenson, also with the new tattoo. The new Messiah and the new tattoo. Mr. Nicholas Crenson says, I'm looking forward to meeting the X-Man James Xaden at some point. And there you are, James Xaden. I was like, what happened? Did JDT maybe pull a leg on you? But let me ask you this question before I'll come back to Nicholas Crenson in a second. But I mean, you did say that you hope to face JDT in a ring sometime. Now, the last I checked, he's only wrestling, I think, for Wrestling Championship Entertainment. Would you be implying you'd like to wrestle the chairman, JDT, in Wrestling Championship Entertainment in 2023?
I would love to, just for the fact, because I would like to take another shot at that and not have that kind of outcome. You never want to have that kind of outcome, especially if you're in a good match or a great match, because you feel like you're missing something, like it takes away from what you've been trying to do during any match that you're in. You don't ever want that to happen because it kills anything you've been working towards. So it's almost like it just gets completely stolen from you. But he's not the only one I want to get in the ring with because I've never backed down from any fight, and I've never
Yeah,
Never.
you look like a guy that definitely wouldn't back down from a fight, and you
No.
look like a guy that I don't think I'd want to be in a ring with, or in a fight, or in a back alley with. And I am from New York, so if I'm saying that,
Yeah.
I means I'm giving you my full ringing endorsement, my full support for you to be back in the ring. And I do want to get into the new Messiah, Nicholas Crenton, because he was with us last week, and he has a new tattoo, and now I can bring him back on the stream because you answered the question that I think some of us wanted to hear, especially those of us who are fans of Wrestling Championship Entertainment. And the new Messiah, Nicholas Crenton, says, I'm looking forward to meeting the X-Man, James Xaden, at some point myself, one-on-one in the WCE ring. I mean, do you know Nicholas Crenton? Do you know anything about him? Have you heard about this guy? Because he is called the new Messiah, and he's definitely made a name for himself over these past several months with his new gimmick and his new attitude, new look, and he's certainly doing very well for himself. And what's your maybe scouting report on Nicholas Crenton?
I know I have studied everybody on the roster and looked at
Oh, you have? Okay,
past
that's
matches
interesting.
just to see what I'm walking into.
Oh,
So,
okay, okay. So you're a
but
student of these guys then. So you've been following them like we all have on WCEHeat.com and WCE Heat on Facebook for Wrestling Championship Entertainment and their YouTube. So you have obviously been watching like us here on Sportswire Radio. Interesting.
yes, I have. You just want to mentally prepare and never take any opponent for granted. I've never done that because at any point in time, just like that, bam, you could get basically defeated and you basically just kind of screwed yourself. So if you always take everybody for granted and you don't think that they're going to be a challenge, then you're going to have a major downfall in your career.
And we certainly don't want that, especially if you're returning to the ring here in 23. But let me ask you this question, and I'm sure that we'll get your thoughts on some other individuals that are in Wrestling Championship Entertainment if they desire to certainly want to talk to you. And Mr. Crenton has a comment as well, and I'll come back to that. But you've obviously, in your own right, have had a decorated career. You've obviously wrestled in some relatively well-known companies throughout the Midwest, and you've had an interesting career. You've won championships, you've had some big feuds, but I mean, how would this roster in 23 compare to maybe the prime of your career, let's say back in 2010, 11, etc.? And what's your thoughts on that?
Every company or group that I've wrestled in, every time there's a ton of unpredictability because you always have different talent. You have different size talent. You have different age talent, but that still doesn't stop for the accounting of what they can pull off in the ring, what they haven't pulled off yet, to pull it out at a special time that people wait sometimes years to do certain things in the ring to make sure they catch you off guard at the right time.
Right.
And throughout my career, I've noticed a lot of making sure that you are ready no matter who you fight for, no matter who lets you get in the ring. And if you get in the ring and you get a moment to take that time, you better make sure you make the best of it, or else you either going to fall or you're not going to have a lot of success. Confidence is another big thing. Make sure you have the confidence in yourself and what you're doing and what you're trying to tell people. Because if you don't, and over the years I've learned this, and I was so green for so long, and everybody that I've learned from and taught me things, I take it to heart and I keep that with me close because I think every single one of them that have taught me down the road, every little thing, just even little suggestions or critiquing anything that you have, take everything. You never learn everything, but everything that you practice and listen to people, you will understand it. But you got to continue. Don't give up. Just because you lose doesn't mean that your whole career is over. Because you lose a belt doesn't mean it's completely over. You can always gain it back. It could be just a temporary thing. You could have had a bad day. You don't know.
Hey, listen, Ric Flair was a 16-time champion, but you know what
Yeah.
that meant? He lost that championship 15 times. I mean, so at the end of the day, listen, they were talking about during the AJ Styles and Finn Balor match. AJ Styles had won 31 championships, but you know what that meant? He lost 31 times technically because he's not a champion at the moment. So that tells you at the end of the day, belts may be temporary, but careers certainly could last a lifetime. And that's why we're fortunate to have you here with us on Sportswire Radio. And I have a couple of comments I want to pull up. And Nicholas Crenton follows up and says, the best kind of opponent is one who studies. Mr. Xaden, I look forward to a worthy fight. Interesting words, but let me get to this individual who was the former interstate openweight champion in WCE, and he was the man that had lost the title to the chairman JDT, and certainly he's got a long-standing relationship with him. That is James Marshall, also sometimes known as
Hey,
Catalyst,
buddy.
and he says it has certainly been a while. So, what's your memories of Mr. Marshall and anything that you may want to share to him, because obviously he's listening and watching, and certainly I know he's been going through some difficult things that may
Yeah.
be off the air and outside the ring, and I want to give him my full support and well wishes and anything we can do, hopefully to keep him chugging along. So, anything you might want to add about Mr. Marshall that certainly those that are listening and watching on Sportswire Radio may be curious to know.
It's been a while. Yes, it has, James. And it'll be really good to see you again because I remember when you just started out and I had hoped you wouldn't give up because the fact that what they didn't see, I saw potential. I see what a lot of people don't see. I understand a lot of people don't understand, but I'm not going to let it get to my head because I know I started at the very bottom and I was at the same spot a lot of these guys are at. So it's going to be really good to see guys like James again because it brings back memories, remembering those days. You know, I was still green, very green, and but he was one of the guys that wanted to get involved. He always helped take down, set up, all of that, and he wanted to get in there, and it was good to see that he did not quit and that he's still doing it. So I'm really excited.
Absolutely, and I always love watching James Marshall in the ring. And I think my favorite match this year in Wrestling Championship Entertainment was actually the Iron Man match between Nicholas Crenson and James Marshall. And I recommend anybody who hasn't, or even if you have, go to WCEHeat.com for more information. Watch that match also on the YouTube page of Wrestling Championship Entertainment. And what you said, James Aiden, was I think so true because I think for every wrestler, in order to break in and to be able to eventually have that success, you have to show your respect. You have to almost kind of not quite pay your dues, but sort of pay your dues. Where you talked about setting up the ring and being there early, being on time, speaking to everybody in the locker room, making sure you say hello, and obviously asking any questions. Because in wrestling, I have always said this, and I've interviewed probably, I don't know, 150, 200 wrestlers at this point. I mean, that's just the way it is here on Sportswire. And I've always said, whether I've spoken with guys like Chad Parham, who wrestled Jeff Hardy, or guys like Disciple in the UK, or currently a world champion, is you have to almost like approach it like a apprenticeship, where you're going out there and you have to learn, because wrestling is not like playing football. It's not like playing basketball. It's not like playing baseball. You have to learn from somebody. Even Randy Orton had to learn. Even
Yep.
Charlotte Flair had. So it doesn't matter. And that's why I'm excited here right now to be with the X-Man, James Aiden. Of course, pro wrestling standout here. And certainly we'll see if maybe we see him in a ring near you in 2023. We're looking at you, Wrestling Championship Entertainment. My name is the Reverend Tom Brice. I am the owner of Sportswire Radio. And if you like what you hear from us 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, you can listen to all of our great content on sportnarium.com/player. And if you like what you hear from us also on Facebook, you can always follow us at Sportswire Radio. Also, I'll be back here Monday, 3 p.m. Eastern Time, 8 o'clock in the UK with pro wrestling star Dan Robertson, a.k.a. the Cult of Killjoy. He's going to be a part of a big match coming up here at Nonstop Action Wrestling's Nuclear Winter. He'll be with some old friends and some familiar foes in the ring. So looking forward to catching up with the Cult of Killjoy himself. That'll be on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, LinkedIn, which you can catch me on LinkedIn at Thomas Brice. Also, sportnarium.com/player. So excited about that. But right now, we are here excited to be with James Xaden, the X-Man. Nicholas Crenson says here, wrestling is an art, and a true artist is always honing his craft. Very well said. But I wanted to ask you, James Xaden, because I've asked some of the other guys that have come on here, and most of the wrestlers that have come on here throughout the world, and I have to ask, what got you into professional wrestling and say, you know what, I want to go out there and be a professional wrestler?
The first ever thing that I've ever seen in wrestling was when my older brother took me and my younger brother up and watched. It was The Undertaker attacking The Ultimate Warrior.
Wow, 1991. Okay, I heard The
Yeah.
Undertaker reference that on the, I think it was the Table for Three with the BSK guys. Okay, all right.
And then
Okay.
saw 1-2-3 Kid pull an upset over Razor Ramon.
That was one. I do remember that as a little kid because
Yep.
that was May 1993. That's how I remember that. Yep.
But it was just watching what they were doing and just a lot of the stuff the guys just wore and like the different matches they were having and the crowd reactions. It was just something that I had never seen before. And I was just hooked. Guys like Bret Hart, Macho Man, British Bulldog, and the gear they wore, it caught my attention. And I have a lot of creativity and stuff, and I like to make my own gear. And that was like something that I wanted personally to have to kind of like pay homage to my heroes.
Sure.
And doing the face paint. And it's always fun to do. I mean, times I've had it where I didn't wear the face paint, but that was when I was kind of not the good guy. So,
oh, well, you know what? Listen, there's an old adage right now in wrestling, and I think Bully Ray said this earlier this week on Busted Open. You may or may not be a good guy depending on where you are, but a true bad person or a true bad guy or bad woman, you might want to say now in wrestling, is just somebody that always does the same actions that nobody particularly likes. But hey, that's here nor there. I do have a comment I'll pull up here in a second, and obviously Bret Hart, I as a kid for many years growing up, and I grew up in Brooklyn, New York, and one of my most treasured possessions was a Bret Hart poster. And the poster that I had was actually the one where it was the Monday Night Raw match, was considered to be still one of the greatest matches in Raw history, where he had beat the 1-2-3 Kid in July 1994. I think it was one of the, maybe it might have been the first match that there actually might have been for the title on Raw itself, because you didn't get on free TV in those. Because in those days on free TV, you didn't get a world title match. The world champion was only defended when you saw it either at a house show or it was on pay-per-view. So that was kind of one of those rare moments. And I don't know why my mother threw that out or where I can't find it. But hey, that's here nor there. And then I do want to pull up a comment because I want to make sure I have it in front of me before I forget. And that is, of course, a guy you might have heard of, Craven Rage, because he was on the stream with the chairman, JDT. And obviously, Craven is certainly our man, especially when you heard me talk about Oos and everything else. Well, he's pretty much the ruler of the yard in WCE. And he's pretty much ran through everybody and stacked them and some. And he has definitely been one of the more deadlier wrestlers. And he very well may be back with us, I think, next Monday, because next Monday we are going to have on Kodak Kid, and Kodak Kid and him have an interesting history. I'll leave that there. So we'll certainly, I'm sure, visit that next Monday on Sportswire Radio. But for now, Craven Rage has to say, well, the champ is here, and welcome, James Xaden. I'm looking forward to seeing the new guy in Wrestling Championship Entertainment to fall to me. Do you have a response to that? Anything you'd like to add on Craven Rage? Because certainly it seems like he's put a mouthful out there as usual.
Well, if I ever get to be in the ring with Craven Rage, I look forward to it. It's like I look forward to every opponent I go against. And depending on what kind of match it'll be, who knows? I might bust through the roster just to get myself maybe my hands on the belts. One of them maybe both. Who knows?
Ladies and gentlemen, did I just hear we could be seeing the X-Man 2 belts? I mean, listen, everybody used to say Becky 2 belts, but could it be X-Man 2 belts? Well, that's certainly a very, very interesting and certainly enticing thought, but I do have a comment I must pull up, and that's a comment you're going to definitely, I'm sure, want to see, and that is, of course, from the chairman himself, JDT. That is the man that we spoke quite a bit of, and he is, of course, our reigning, defending interstate openweight champion, and he has a lot to say here, so you may want to see it. He says, there is absolutely no one in this world that has the bond that James Xaden and myself have. And to grow up together, to be raised up together, and to get into wrestling together. No one in this business or any other company could break this bond we share. My brother, I look forward to getting back in the ring with you. Hashtags no weakness, chairman, chair shots for all, coming back faster to Tunjer, coming back faster on on and more daggers and coming back. How about let's repeat it? Because I don't know. You know I love you, JDT, but I'm gonna just say no weakness, chairman, chair shots for all, coming back for more. That's because I don't. Oh, he
Come
meant
back
to say
faster,
stronger.
stronger, and more
Coming. Yeah,
dangerous.
I was like, okay, that's sorry because I know it's late. I know people can't spell, but that's okay. And so I got the point, JDT. I apologize. I only read off what's on the screen, but let's get to the fact that he did have a lot to say there, and I'd like to ask you, James Xaden, about Mr. JDT's thoughts to you.
All I gotta say is to that, when I'm in the ring with him, with even Craven, and I know he's those guys are going to be a handful in the ring, or anybody else could be a handful in the ring. Anyone that I get in the ring with, and JDT, this goes to you too. You better bring everything, not just your A game, the entire game that you can bring, because I do not fall easy, and it's going to take a lot now than it did before to come across a defeat, because I've been planning, practicing, training, studying for all the time that I was off. So I'm going to be coming back a lot stronger than I did.
Let me
Make sure he
let
brings
me
it all.
Oh, I'm sure he will. The chairman, I have no doubt, will. And I'll come back to Nicholas Crenson in a second. But I wanted to ask you this question as I'm thinking about this now and hearing you talk and hearing all the different things you've put out there. And it almost, in a way, reminds me. I almost feel like you've got a second chance at life. It reminds me almost. And several years back, Sting comes into WWE and he has the match with Triple H. He has one other match, and then he wrestles Seth Rollins for the title, and an accident happens in the ring, and we thought he was never going to wrestle again, and he's been able to obviously have a kind of a nice revival in his career in AEW, and he's wrestled here and has done pretty remarkable stuff for somebody of Sting's caliber, and I'm not going to quite make the comparison to you and Sting, but I'm going to make the comparison in a way that oh, listen, you, me both. If I was close enough, I'd pull out my Wolfpack Sting and WCW NWO trading card. But that's not the point. What my general point is that Sting's gotten a second chance at his career, a second act, more or less. So really, in Sting's case, it's like a 20-second act. But the point is that he was supposed to have been done after a mishap in his match against Seth Rollins. From what you've explained to us, there was a mishap in that match that you had with JDT. Do you approach this now in 23 that you're going to be back in the ring somewhere, maybe in WCE, that you're getting a second act here and you're going to appreciate every moment and almost approach it like it's the last one? I mean, what's your thoughts on that?
When that happened and I was sitting at home, I would see constant things and reminders of people that, whether it was an injury or they lost a loved one, or just seeing that people that have been passing away, especially like guys like Jason David Frank just recently. And there's
Oh my God, I was talking about that actually a few hours ago. I was out actually eating for dinner, and the bartender, I was telling him about Jason David Frank, the Green Power Ranger, unfortunately committed suicide because he got divorced and not too long ago. And how sad is that, right?
It's terrible. And I mean, there's tons more even beyond him.
Oh, sure. Sure.
You sit there and you think, is this really the way that it is all going to just stop like a train wreck, you know? And I, for the longest time, I didn't want to think about wrestling. Like I
Sure.
was just angry at myself because I knew I could have avoided that. But again, I didn't account for that, or I wasn't planning properly. I was more of in a rush, which was a mistake. But after sitting at home and just dwelling and just getting upset, I'd one day just clicked that I need to get back into it. That this isn't going to define me, and that getting an opportunity again would, yes, be a definite second chance. And if ever given the chance, I'm going to run it till the wheels fall off. And
All right. Well, I mean, those are certainly some strong words and certainly some words here. Let me come to Nicholas Crenson. He says, I look forward to every opponent I get into the ring with, Mr. Xaden. I commend your bravery, but also those can always become famous last words. Again, I will always implore anyone who feels helpless and like there isn't any other choice left. You have people who love and need you. Those people will be there when you need them. I definitely agree with you on that. And such a terrible thing that happened with the Green Power Ranger, because especially for those of us who are probably from the ages between, I'd say, 30 and let's say, I guess 45ish at this point. I mean, you pretty much, the Power Rangers were pretty much your childhood. So I mean, to the fact that somebody from our, basically one of our contemporaries does that, it's sad. JDT says fingers work faster than my brain. Yeah, you, me both. I mean, listen, but that's there. I wanted to ask you though, and I'll come back to WCE in a second, and just talking about some of the memories in the first act of your career. I know you won a couple different championships. You had some big wars. Jonathan Splash comes to mind. You can obviously YouTube you and you can find some of those memories. But when it comes to some of the success in the first act of your career, what stands out for you?
the constant starting to gaining momentum was one of my biggest memories, because at first I didn't think it was going to work out. But as I progressed, the matches kept getting better. And I was defining myself as what kind of a character I wanted to be. I've had some great matches. I've had some great storylines. I've done some pretty crazy stuff. And the more I got into the ring, the crazier I wanted to do stuff in the ring. And it became more of how I just didn't want to back down from anybody, because anytime I got in the ring with somebody, I just didn't want to I didn't want to look weak. And I had to prove myself, because it was a dream of mine for so long, and I wasn't going to let anything stop me. And yeah, it was.
Let me ask you a question, because you said some interesting things there, and I go back to obviously the countless wrestlers that we've had on Sportswire Radio, and you talked about some crazy things that you've done in the ring in your career. And there's no doubt every wrestler does something that probably goes against what they might want to think in that match or in that moment. But in the second act of your career that's coming up here in 23, wherever that might be, it could be in WWE for all I know, right? It could be in AEW for all I know, right? I mean, right now you're a free agent, if I'm not mistaken. So, I mean, you could be anywhere, right? So, in this second act of your career, do you look back on the first act and say, okay, you know what? I did some things that, you know what, maybe my body can't do, and I'm going to wrestle differently? Or do you look at it and take some of the things you did in the first act, and, okay, I'm going to use this, but maybe I'm going to do it in a more smarter way. I'm going to be tactically a different wrestler. I mean, Stone Cold was an example where after the Owen Hart injury was a totally different wrestler. I mean, Sting is a much different wrestler than he was now. So there are wrestlers. I would even say Shawn Michaels' second act in his career certainly was a different act. I mean, so based off that, are there things that you know not to do in the second act? that you did in the first act? And are there things you did in the first act that you're going to do maybe more tactically or maybe more smarter to help your career be prolonged this time?
Well, I've been constantly watching everything that I've done that was a mistake that I've made. And I want to take all the mistakes that I've made and I want to turn them into something that I can basically pull out of a hat and make it so I don't fall and injure myself again like last time. But a lot of the moves that I pulled off, I can still pull them off.
Oh, I'm sure you could. Listen, I'm sure you could pull them off, but we want to make sure that you have a long second act. We want to
Yes.
make sure it's a successful second act because the first act, no question, you had some big success. You were a big guy in the Midwest. You won championships. You were a part of some legendary feuds, but we want to make sure that you stay in there. But I do have a message from Wrestling Championship Entertainment from management, and I think you'd be curious to hear what management has to say. And
Oh, yeah.
I might want to read that off for you, and for those that are listening and watching on Sportswire Radio. Management from Wrestling Championship Entertainment has this to say: 2023 will be a WCE season filled with hard-hitting face-offs. I am excited to see all these guys finally step into the ring to put their words into action. Champions are created inside those ropes. It is sure to be epic. Welcome to the fray, James Xaden. So it sounds to me, the X-Man, that you are going to have a home in 2023 from our friends over at Wrestling Championship Entertainment. So I have to get your response, the X-Man, and for those that are listening and watching here on Sportswire Radio.
I look forward to next year, and I'm going to do everything I can to make sure I stay healthy, that I strategically plan what I'm going to do in my matches, not just throw out any high risk moves. You know, I want to do it strategically and making sure I'm doing it correctly. But I thank management for bringing me into the family, and that it's going to be an exciting year, put it that way. And I'm going to make sure I have a long career with them, because I've been excited since.
You've been excited since we're getting calls left and right from you. I mean, listen, at this point, ladies and gentlemen, I think that the WWE just was trying to call here James Xaden. I think Tony Khan was trying to call him. I think certainly Billy Corgan in the NWA was trying to reach out to James Xaden here, because it looks like everybody is excited about the news here that the newest member of the Wrestling Championship Entertainment roster is the X-Man, James Xaden. He will be appearing for us here in 2023 here. We look forward to seeing the future of Wrestling Championship Entertainment. And, of course, a lot to get into here. We've heard shots fired from Craven Rage. We've seen shots fired from the new Messiah, Nicholas Crenson. The chairman, JDT, has responded. Sean Jovi's popped in here. James Marshall, the former Interstate Openweight champion, has popped in here. So a lot of the roster, a lot of the locker room is abuzz to the newest signing here of the Wrestling Championship Entertainment roster, and that is the X-Man, James Xaden, who will be coming to a ring near you at our friends over at Wrestling Championship Entertainment, who I highly recommend that you follow, of course, on Facebook at WCE Heat, otherwise known as Wrestling Championship Entertainment. WCEHeat.com for information on your favorite rosters, your favorite matches. Also, there is a poll up now. If you share, you can find that on the Wrestling Championship Entertainment page on your favorite show of the year. There's many great shows to choose from obviously Fighter Fright Day 1 and Day 2, and I think about, listen, Blaze of Glory and all these different shows, and looks like we're joined here. Enough about that, because James, I think Tony Khan was calling you. Billy Corgan was calling you. I think Triple H and Stephanie were probably on a three-way with you right now. I mean, everybody is abuzz to the fact that you are now the newest member of Wrestling Championship Entertainment. I mean, how does it feel?
I am excited, and I wish I could wrestle right now, because I want to get in that ring so bad. I was just super excited to be on this so that I was able to talk, see you, brother.
Enough of I'm a little guy on the totem pole.
Hey,
Wrestling
man.
Championship Entertainment. They're the big boys right now. I mean, listen, like I said, I've heard that Billy Corgan's scouting, Tony Khan's scouting. I've heard Triple H is scouting. I've heard pretty much you name a promoter. I've heard, listen, Court Bauer's recruiting. I've heard, listen, Scott D'Amore and Impact. Everybody is scouting the WC Heat roster. So trust me, everybody is scouting Wrestling Championship Entertainment because their matches on YouTube. Darkfire's got a match out there, I think, with close to 3,000 views. So everybody right now is abuzz with Wrestling Championship Entertainment. So this is a big deal, big deal.
Yeah, it is.
Well, I'm happy to certainly break the news, and we love our friends here. And certainly, again, I do want to also bring up the poll here. If you can on Facebook, share or make sure you vote in your poll. Fight or Fright, Day 2, Day 1, Blaze of Glory, Spirit in the Sky, Red, White, and Bruise, Beat the Heat. I mean, there's a number of matches and shows this year that you can choose from. I think my show of the year, probably, I'd have to say, if I were to have a vote, which you could count me down for management, I'd have to say probably Blaze of Glory, just because, again, the history there, Sean Jovi, Darkfire, and I think about also the Craven Rage I Quit match. I think about just everything that went on there, Adonis, Darkfire, JDT, and I think about everything with Dash Andrews, all the different stuff that wound up going on there. I think that would probably have to be maybe my show of the year, but hey, it don't matter about me. It's about you, the fans. And Craven Rage says, well, welcome to my yard, the man, and the Universal Grand Slam Wisconsinite champion, Craven Rage. So Craven Rage has rolled out the red carpet there for you in his own unique way here, Mr. James Xaden.
Well, anybody that's welcoming me is obviously wants me there. So, again, before my computer cut out again, I'm thankful to WCE management for the kind words and for welcoming me to come to the company with open arms. And there's a few connections to the show that I've had that kind of tie into my past. So it's new with old, and it ties into where I got James Marshall there. I'm going to have JDT there, but I got a lot of challenges ahead that I need to make sure I'm not just falling to people left and right, that I get W's against these guys. But
Let me, go ahead, jump in, continue.
But if I'm getting an invitation from anybody to battle them, to wrestle them in the ring, again, I don't turn down any challenges.
I have no doubt about that. You certainly seem like a guy that's going to be primed, poised, and ready for a big season coming up here from our friends over at Wrestling Championship Entertainment. But let me ask you two questions. I'm going to ask you the first question and kind of see what you think, because I think you'll probably have a better answer on this than the second question I'm going to ask you. Is that when it comes to the first question here, the off season still is a while from now when the season resumes. So we've got basically hot stove WC Heat Talk for at least December, January, February, maybe March if we're lucky, but realistically April when things obviously resume. So we've got at least a good, let's say, between 4 and 5 months. It doesn't sound like a long time, but you and I both know winter could be a while.
Yeah.
So the fact of the matter is, you haven't been in the ring for as long as you've been. We spoke about it here at length throughout the show. I mean, how anxious are you going to be? How are you going to keep yourself focused? Because unlike these other guys, they have been in the ring throughout the season. They kind of have a plan to be able to adjust and get ready. You don't have that. So talk to me about that.
It's going to be mentally challenging because of the fact that you have to not let it intimidate you, but at the same time, I don't have a ring to practice in or run the ropes or anything like that. So it's almost like the feeling of first starting out, but I'm not. So it's going to be interesting to see if I still have it. and I certainly hope I do. But I know when I get back in that ring, I feel like it'll be like riding a bike. You won't forget.
How do you deal with ring rust then? Because you're gonna face it. You're gonna face that ring rust, and it's been a long time since you've been in that ring. So you kind of walked into that. I mean, I've spoken with wrestlers left and right, and they tell me, Tom, ring rust is a real thing. And,
Mhm.
guys I would speak with in England that when they came back to the ring, it was their first time last year in just about 2 years in many cases, maybe a year and a half if they were lucky. And I would ask them that question. They say, that first bump, it's going to feel like it's never been like any other bump I felt since I started out. For you, I'd have to think it's going to be times 10 because those guys and gals, when I spoke to them, it was a year and a half to 2 years. We're talking about a lot longer here for you. So, how do you deal with ring rust?
You got to push through that pain, pretty much.
Well,
But no, you become very sore, like you've never felt before. It is not like it is true. It is nothing like when you have been in the ring a while. The pain that you feel normally on a day to day basis when you're in the ring more than I've been, it's gonna feel like I got hit. Like I would say when I first started, like very, very, very first day taking, even just running the ropes. You get the bruising on your back. You get the long strips of bruising from the ropes. When you take the bumps, it almost knocks the wind out of you because you're not used to it.
right, right, right.
You could get disoriented. I just hope it's not too bad, but I'm feeling like since it's been as long as it has, it's gonna have to be something I got to push through. As bad as it's gonna hurt, I know it's gonna. Ring rust is very real.
Well,
It's not just a term.
and listen, we just saw Soraya in the ring last week against Dr. Britt Baker at the AEW show, and it was the first time she was in the ring in 5 years, and you could kind of tell toward the end of that match, or even just the first few spots in the match that, and again, I'm not a professional wrestler, but I've seen enough wrestling at this point to kind of make a judgment call that she was definitely winded a little bit. She was definitely gassed. There's nothing you could train all you want. You could hit the gym like you do all day, but nothing can make up for the fact that when you return in that ring for Wrestling Championship Entertainment, you're going to face something that your body hasn't felt going back to, I don't know, 15 years ago in wrestling school. I mean, that's just the reality of it. And I have a couple more comments before I get to my next part of my question. As we're here with pro wrestling star James Xaden, probably another about 15 or 20 minutes. We're certainly appreciative of his time as we broke the news here that he will be a part of the Wrestling Championship Entertainment roster coming up here in 2023. And we'll be back also with more WC coverage here coming up next Monday with Kodak Kid. And it looks like Craven Rage is going to be in the house with us. Craven also says here, welcome to my yard, the man and the universal Grand Slam Wisconsinite champion, Craven Rage. Well, I might be welcoming you, but honestly, I am welcoming you to fall to me. Hey, stay tuned. It could be a matchup that a lot of people would like to see. JDT says, I'd love to have a three-way with Stephanie. Well, you know what? I'm going to plead the fifth on that. The reason I'm going to plead the fifth on that, although I will tell you, I've always had a big-time crush on Stephanie going back to 20-plus years ago. The reason I'm going to plead the fifth on that is because I do have a background in New York politics, and I worked for 2 New York state senators, and I know somebody eventually is going to look this up because I already have gotten phone calls in the past. Well, you're this big radio guy, and I've heard you speak with wrestler after wrestler, and I do have a LinkedIn with several hundred connections. So I'm going to plead the fifth on that, other than saying that Stephanie McMahon has always been a very, very beautiful woman. And I've thought that since I was in high school. But that's all I'm going to say is very respectfully as I can, because we are a family show. And I will have somebody that will say, I heard you say something. But so JDT, I'll leave that one to you, my friend. You have my endorsement on whatever you want to do there. But if I still had my chair, I'd help you knock the ring rust off. Yeah, that was something we spoke about last time JDT is here. I miss my chair, and I'm sure we'll speak about that with you, my friend, next time you come on. But I want to ask the second part of my question that I wound up that I really wanted to get into. And that's the fact that I've heard other wrestlers say this that have come on here on Sportswire, and I want to get your thoughts on it because you're going to be back in the ring here for us in 23. And sometimes wrestlers that have not seen somebody like yourself will not be able to scout you. Other guys that might be familiar with you, like a JDT or a James Marshall, who kind of know who you are a little bit, they're going to be able pretty much to know what your moves are going to be. So I almost have to pose the question. And in fact, the guys that you're familiar with, I'm sure you're going to have an idea on what to do and what not to do. But the guys in this roster that you haven't wrestled, correct me if I'm wrong, it's almost like it's an unexpected, it's like a wild card situation. So do you almost want to face the guys that you've already faced because of unfinished business and the fact that you've already faced them, you know their MO, or these unknowns? Because we have a roster that has no history with you, nothing to do with you. So I'm so curious on how you go about that when it comes to this.
Like I said, I'm not going to take any new opponent that I've never faced because there's a few on here that they're not like anything that I've been in a ring with.
Mm-hmm.
So by doing what I've always been doing, not taking anybody for granted and understanding that you can fall to anybody. It don't matter your size. If you
Right.
play your cards right, you can take down anybody. So I will have to go in there making sure that I go in as strong as I can, and hopefully I can pull a win because with these new guys, you don't know what to expect from any of them. You don't know if someone will turn on you. You don't know if secretly they got guys that are kind of in their back pocket that they can pull out and have them come out noticing you're getting the upper hand when you're the new guy, so they want to kind of take you down and cut you off at the legs as soon as possible. But as far as the guys that I've been in the ring with already,
Sure.
I may have to start working on some new stuff, not just all the same old stuff.
Hmm.
Kind of change it up a bit so that way I'm catching them off guard as also with catching the others off guard.
Interesting. Almost as if a pitcher in, let's say, baseball wants to add another pitch or maybe change their arsenal because the first time they hitters saw them, they kind of had a scouting report. But in order that second time to fool the hitters, you have to change it up, whether it's to throw a curveball, whether it's to throw a changeup, whatever that might be in the
Or
arsenal. And
pitch both handed.
you know what? I mean, I'm sure somebody out there is going to take your advice on that. But James Marshall likes to say, as for learning how to wrestle, I learned from so many people in the great state of Wisconsin, which, by the way, we love the state of Wisconsin here on Sportswire Radio. And we also love the state of Wisconsin because, well, it's the cheese state, right? And of course, in New York, right, we love pizza, right? And of course, how do we get pizza, right? It's from cheese, right? And a lot of that comes from the great state of Wisconsin, the Great Lakes state, obviously. So we want to make sure we acknowledge Wisconsin and also recognize all the great people from Wisconsin, like Wrestling Championship Entertainment. So I wanted to make sure I do that and recognize everybody here. But the one person I have to give thanks to for taking me under his wing when no one else wanted to was Tim Mecca. Tim Mecca, I'm sure you're somebody that you're familiar with, and I wanted to ask you about Tim Mecca. Talk about Tim Mecca and why he took so many wrestlers under his wing, whether it's like a James Marshall and any of your memories you have with him.
I've had some good matches with him, especially in the early in my career. And he liked to take people under his wing because he knew what it felt like to be the underdog, the guy that people didn't want to take attention to, that didn't want to work with them because they just didn't have the patience. He was a guy that wanted to because he enjoyed doing that. And I love the matches that I had with him. Every match that I've had, I've enjoyed very much. But with Tim Mecca, yeah, he was a guy that I did learn from also. And I fell to him a few times, but nonetheless, he was a guy to be one of the few to take the underdogs under his wing, to want to show them the ropes, basically, when no one else wanted to. So I thank him for doing that for me as well, and I'm glad he did it for James. Because who knows? What if he didn't do that? Where would we be if we didn't get somebody to kind of stick up for us? You know, the little guys.
Absolutely. And that's an excellent point, and I want to bounce off that for a second, if you don't mind. And how
Sure.
important would that be? Let's say you get into this locker room in wrestling championship entertainment, and there are going to be some guys that may not have the experience that you have, or even experience from other people here. And I'm curious on, would you be passing on knowledge? Would you be using your ability, let's say, outside the ring to maybe speak to these different guys? Because there are some guys in WC that are seasoned, right? I don't have to explain who is and who isn't at this
Yeah,
point. But I mean, would you, if wrestlers went to you in the locker room and said, you know what, X Man, do you think I could do this differently? Do you think I could approach my match differently, or anything else that might help them improve their craft? Is that something that you may do if you're asked upon it, or would you take that upon your own, I guess, way to do that? Or give me your thoughts on that.
absolutely, I would because it's paying it forward. Because
Sure.
what if you are the guy that they learn from? And it's like, you know, because of you, I stuck with it. Just from the one time that you explained this to me, I kept doing it. I didn't give up. So there's always those things you got to think about that you started down at the bottom yourself. We were all green. We were all starting, didn't know nothing. So I absolutely would. If I had anybody coming to me to ask me for any information or knowledge, I would not hesitate.
All right, fair point there. So I think that's kind of what I thought the answer would be. And let me get to a couple of other comments. Bouncing back off the Tim Mecca point, Nicholas Crenson, the new Messiah, says, I learned from Tim Mecca as well. I think Tim is one of the reasons some of us are still here. JDT says, like many wrestlers say they're a Heyman guy. Well, we are all Mecca guys. I mean, is that something that, when we look at Tim Mecca, obviously we know about his career, we know about the success, but is that maybe his long lasting maybe effect or impact? Is that there are so many guys maybe that are across the Midwest, especially let's say in WCE, that learned, I guess, what to do more or less when it comes to being a professional wrestler? Is that a fair statement for me to make?
It is. And when you get that type of person to help you through the tough times, to explain to you, it's going to get better. Just stick with it. You know, you get a bond with people, and it's always there. No matter what you go through, no matter where you're at, you're always going to remember that point in time, and it always takes you back every time when, especially if you haven't seen them in so long. It just takes you straight back to the days of when you first met each other, first went through everything that you did. And then you reminisce of matches and just life in general. It's you're thankful for that. Some guys not so much, are very thankful or appreciative, but I for one am, and I'm sure these guys are also.
No, I think it's safe to say, and I don't think I have to go on a limb in saying this, because I think I've pretty much spoken to at least half the locker room in WCE. And I think, at least, and I'm pretty sure I can speak for a lot of guys in the locker room or in the back here that might be listening or watching this, that I think a lot of guys here are very appreciative of the opportunities that they've been given. They're very appreciative of the careers that they've had, and the fact that they've gotten an opportunity here in Wrestling Championship Entertainment to have the kind of success that they'd like to have. And continue their career. I think about guys like Sean Jovi, who've been around a long time. I mean, JDT,
Oh yeah,
25 years, finally wins his first title. Nicholas Crenson has been in the ring for about, I think, 18 years. Craven Rage has been around a long time. And, so there's a number of guys. James Marshall, who we referenced. I mean, listen, Darkfire's been there just about almost as long. So I think that there's no question. I think a lot of the different guys that are here that are in WCE, I think, do appreciate the opportunity that they've been given. I do think that they'll do the same, and just like that Tim did. And I think that that's why we'll certainly be very excited to see what the X-Man James Xaden has to offer. So Before I get to closing thoughts and ask you a couple of questions, I want to ask you this question directly toward Wrestling Championship Entertainment, because I've gotten obviously the synopsis on JDT, gotten a little bit of the background with Craven Rage. I know he's always lurking, some of the other guys, but I want to give you the opportunity. Do you want to say anything directly, just in a general statement, to anybody in Wrestling Championship Entertainment who you might stand across the apron from?
Make sure, expect the unexpected. I'm not like every other wrestler. I'm very different when it comes to in-ring ability. Even the look is not like everybody else.
Sure.
It's a whole new animal when you're in the ring with me. But I want you to bring your best. I want the best of whoever I'm in the ring with, because I don't want half of what you could be getting when you're in a match, because you want the best matches you can possibly get. But when you really want a good battle, you want them at 100%. You want them coming at you full force, because I like the challenge. I really do. I always have. It put me through some hard times, put me through some losses. But in the end, I took it as a learning experience more than I took it as a loss. But whoever I'm in the ring with, just know I'm bringing all I got, even new ability in that ring. And I'm not the little small guy that I was. So,
well, it's funny you said that, because obviously you were 160 pounds or so back years ago, but I think now you're a little bit bigger and you might be a little bit more stronger than you were then. You had a lot of success back then. So that's an interesting point, that in the second run here, we're going to see a more bulked up, a more stronger version of the X-Man James Xaden. So, I mean, that's a very, very intriguing point. That might be the point that might serve you most here when it comes to the second act here, especially in Wrestling Championship Entertainment. So very, very interesting points there. And I think a lot of people are going to be very excited to see you in the ring here in a few short months here in moments. But let me ask you this question before I get to closing thoughts and obviously everything else. I know you're a busy man. You've got interviews, you got phone calls, you got all different stuff that's lined up for you. Now that we've broke the news here, you're going to be a part of the WC roster. But I mean, was there a championship that stood out most in your career that you won, that you said, you know what? That was the championship that really made the first act what it was, or kind of solidified me. Is there a championship that maybe you won that was the most that you really looked upon and said, that's where I made it, or that was made the run what it was? Anything that come to mind with that?
yes.
So let's talk about it.
It was a match against one of the guys that I've fought many times, and we've had some battles. We had some really, really good battles, and I'm going to forever remember those. But I had taken the championship from him, and I would say ego got to me, so I became this different side of James Xaden that took. Sometimes I wouldn't wear the face paint, but when I did wear it, it wasn't the happy like what I'm wearing now. It was more of like wanting to intimidate you, and it was more full-faced. But he challenged me to taking his company down. So what I did, and the ego that I had, I wanted to do it. And I wanted to do it as embarrassing as possible for him. And I had the belt. I was on top of the world, and it was inside a soccer dome or a soccer field indoors. And the match was very intense. It was very violent, brutal. I got thrown through chairs, like piles of chairs. And then
Oh my God.
But the interesting part in that match, the fans ended up turning on him. He was the hero. And we were in Chicago. They started chanting for me. I don't know why, but it happened. So, granted, yeah, I knew the show was over when I beat him. And they asked, well, now what? Well, I left the show with the belt. So no one took that from me. So I
Mm.
always forever have that. I killed the show and I kept that belt and it's never been taken from me. But I know we can't really count it as records, but I still it was the most memorable moment of one of my most memorable moments. The it was it was intense, adrenaline rush, one of my absolute favorite matches.
You're the second wrestler that's actually told me that they've won a championship from a company that's defunct and technically never lost the title. And I'm always kind of so curious because the guy that we've had on is sort of somewhat big in the UK, and his name's Chris Murphy, and I think he's actually won two titles. He's actually been in two championship situations like this. So I almost have to ask you then because I asked Chris this question, and I mean, do you look back differently? Should you have handled that situation differently? Would you have, let's say, an older, different personality, or was it the right call to kind of go about it the way you did? I mean, I wasn't in your shoes, right? And anybody listening or watching would probably feel the same way. But I mean, would you have done anything differently in that spot, or do you think it was the right call? Or even how it sounds like from what you said, the guy that you wrestled didn't sound like he handled the situation great either. So it's kind of like a catch 22. But I mean, what's your thoughts on that?
Well, when you're not the good guy and you have a belt, your motives completely change. But also mentioning that I kind of was feeling invincible due to the fact that during one of my matches was one of the times that I thought I was going to be out again, but I never became injured. So I felt like I was like bulletproof. There was a
Sure.
guy twice my size, almost 300 pounds, and came off the top rope, landed directly on my ribs. Didn't have any
Hmm.
fractures, didn't have any breaks, didn't knock the wind out of me. I got back in the ring and match continued, but I became champion. So it's like I defeated that injury. I became champion. My ego kept exploding, and I just went from there. And it was one of those moments that you kind of just take the initiative. And when you're in the heat of the moment with another opponent that you've faced many times, you want to prove yourself no matter what way it is. And to be honest, I were in that same situation, kind of, I kind of would honestly.
It's tough because you know what I mean. Obviously, it's not to the degree of Bret Hart and Shawn Michaels, where you're talking about obviously Montreal and
Yeah,
obviously the heated animosity that the two had. But I mean, I looked at it as a kid, and I was like, well, you know, Bret was 100% right. But I look at it now, and obviously interviewing so many wrestlers, a part of me says, well, you know what? Maybe he should have actually just said, you know what, Shawn, I'm leaving, you know, let you have the championship. But obviously I'm not in that moment. So what do I know? Right. I'm not in those shoes. So it's hard to make a judgment call. That's why I was curious about your thoughts. Whereas when I had asked Chris Murphy, that Chris Murphy's basically situation was, well, the company that he wrestled for became defunct and he wound up just being the champion and the company's never really restarted back. So that was because of COVID and different things, but your situation's slightly different. So I kind of, in a way, expected that answer, but it's still, you know, it's always those things in life. I mean, unfortunately, you get put in situations and maybe you wish you could handle things differently. I mean, we've all been there. And I mean, I'm obviously like anybody else, I'm in the same boat. There's many things I could, but I thought it was so curious to ask you that. But, you know, before I get to closing thoughts, I did want to ask you one more question. Obviously, it's been a tremendous honor to have you. And congratulations on obviously
thank you.
being back in the ring. And I'm looking forward to watching you in the ring this time live and getting the opportunity to cover you and obviously being there maybe in person to watch you in the ring for WCE. That would be something that I think we're all going to do our best to work on. I think that's something that I'm excited about and the company will be as well. But is there one or two moments that stand out most in your career in the first act?
Yes.
Okay, tell me.
Very first match I ever had was against the two guys that I grew up and training with, and they were like basically brothers to me. And JDT was the one other guy, and then the other guy that we wrestled with him at plenty of times. It was a triple threat match that we had, and the spots we did in that match, it was so fun, and it was like getting a golden ticket to Willy Wonka's chocolate factory. You're like a kid in the candy store. It's like you've never been in a ring ever, and you've gotten this chance now to just prove to everybody first on the card, and you just go all out. And I did take one spot off the turnbuckle where it was basically a top rope stunner, and it hurt so bad, but it turned out beautiful. I gotta say that I can't deny it.
All right. Well, I hope it was worth the pain there.
Yes.
Oh, okay. All right. That's good.
But there were also other matches that we had, and the one guy that it was a triple threat tag match, and the one guy that was in the match, he went by the name Big Mac, and he had, after I had left there, or we all kind of did, he had shortly after that passed away. So I always remember him.
I'm sorry.
Kinda,
I'm sorry.
but there was a spot in the match that me and the guy that I was tagged with was the other guy that was like a brother to me. It was the first time he ever got a move where he was taken off his feet and up in the air and slammed. So it's a pretty good moment. So I took that as something no one was able to ever do, that we pulled it off. It was a feat that was very, very, very memorable. And then one move that I did that I'll never forget was a very, very high risk, high spot move. It was the move like the whisper in the wind off of the basketball hoop into the ring onto my opponent.
Oh wow!
Which became it was a buildup between me and the two guys that were involved that I was going against, that ended up joining into a stable with them, and then end up becoming a part of the tag champions with them, and then faced the two top guys, and I had a good match. And I took a very different look too. It was one of my first bad guy turns.
Oh,
so it was very, very memorable for my beginning of the career, because I learned a lot very quickly in a short amount of time.
well, I'll tell you what. I mean, I look forward to seeing some of those things take place here in Wrestling Championship Entertainment. Obviously, very, very excited to hear about the news of James Xaden, the X-Man, being the newest part of our roster, and it is a stacked roster. And I always say, arguably the best roster around is in Wrestling Championship Entertainment, and certainly after hearing about the legendary wars with JDT and the back and forth with the likes of the new Messiah, Nicholas Crenson, and also James Marshall and Craven Rage and Sean Jovi. I think about some of the other stars we've got here: Dash Andrews, Kodak Kid, and Adonis Felios, Darkfire. And I mean, there is a deep, deep roster here, and I'm looking forward to certainly speaking about it. Obviously, Mark Packer and Liz certainly have done a phenomenal job. They have outdone themselves and some here, and I am looking forward to certainly the future of the company and many more appearances with James Xaden and the X-Man. I know you're a busy man. I know it's getting late, so I want to give you the floor. I want to give you some closing thoughts. Anything you'd like to plug, share, say with us here on Sportswire Radio, and congratulations again. And I turn it over to you now, my friend, and fire away.
I look forward to every moment now I get this time on this second chance. And again, I'm very grateful for WCE for giving me this opportunity. I look forward to meeting Mark Packer. I look forward to meeting everybody, even though I'm going to be in the ring with them at one point or another, but I still am looking forward to meeting every one of them. So I know, even close up view, what I'm up against and who they are. So I'm like I said, I'm going to run this one till the wheels fall off.
Well, I'm excited about that. I'll tell you that much, ladies and gentlemen. Here, certainly, we've seen a lot. We've seen. I believe that it's going to be an off season that you are going to be very, very excited for, and I think that James Aiden's going to fit in here perfectly. He's going to do a phenomenal job. And if I'm our two champions right now, whether it's Craven Rage or JDT, I would definitely hold on to those championships. Hold on to them for dear life. Look at them each and every day and value every moment you have with those titles because James Aiden, the X-Man, has won gold before, and he very well could be getting gold in the near and distant future. And I got a good feeling here. This second act, it's going to be a big-time comeback, certainly. Like I had mentioned before, we mentioned Sting's comeback. We've seen Shawn Michaels' comeback. I mean, there's been a number of great comebacks. Soraya's, obviously, we're going to see how her comeback does. I got a feeling that this comeback is going to do a lot better than the CM Punk comeback in AEW. Spoiler alert here on Sportswire. But obviously, my friend, congratulations on the news here. I'm looking forward to watching you in the ring. I'm looking forward to having you here throughout the off season and having a lot more to speak about with you. And again, if you like Wrestling Championship Entertainment, please go to WCEHeat.com, Wrestling Championship Entertainment on YouTube, Facebook as well. Also follow Sean Jovi's vlogs. And thank you, my friend. And I look forward to speak with you soon. Yep. And ladies and gentlemen, we are here with pro wrestling star, the X-Man, James Aiden, who again, one more time, is now the newest member of the Wrestling Championship Entertainment roster, where you can catch him here in 2023 coming up in the spring. You'll see him with a who's who of people, and we will have more coverage of Wrestling Championship Entertainment here. That'll be next Monday with Kodak Kid and Craven Rage. We'll also be back here Monday night once again with the Cult of Killjoy. That'll be afternoon here in New York and Illinois, Wisconsin time. So I look forward to speaking with him. We'll also be back with Disciple, the GT Ministries World Champion, on Thursday, but we'll have an announcement for that on Monday's show. So thank you, everybody, again.
Thank you.
My name is the Reverend Tom Brice, and we'll be back here very soon. I'll see everybody here Monday afternoon, evening, and for more WCE coverage next Monday on the number one global radio station, that is Sports Wire Radio. Good night, good morning.